Ellie Gould was born on February 6, 2002, in the quiet British town of Cal. She grew up surrounded by a large, close-knit family. In addition to her parents and older brother, many relatives lived nearby, and they all remained closely connected. From a young age, Ellie developed a deep love for animals, especially horses. Her parents regularly took her to local stables, and before long, they decided to get her a pony of her own. Horseback riding quickly became a passion. Ellie began training seriously and soon started competing in local events, where she achieved impressive results. Alongside her dedication to riding, she had clear goals for her future. She planned to study psychology after finishing school and hoped to one day join the mounted police. By early 2019, 17-year-old Ellie was in her final year of school. Known for her easygoing nature, she had many friends and was the kind of person who avoided drama and got along with just about everyone. That same year, she started dating a classmate, her first relationship, and she was excited about the new experience. On the morning of May 3rd, Ellie followed her usual routine. She got up early to prepare for the day, though she didn't have any morning classes and wasn't expected at school until noon. She had arranged for a friend to pick her up later in the day, said goodbye to her parents as they left for work, and stayed home to wait. But later that morning, Ellie sent her friend a message. She said she had decided to skip school and told her not to come by. It didn't seem like anything unusual, just a teen deciding a couple of classes weren't worth the trip. Her friend didn't think twice and headed to school alone. Around 3 p.m., Ellie's father came home from work. As he stepped into the kitchen, he was met with a scene no parent is ever prepared for. Ellie was lying face down on the floor, surrounded by a large pool of blood. At first, he thought it might have been some kind of accident. Maybe she had slipped and hit her head. But then he noticed the blood splattered across the room and saw a knife lodged deep in her neck. Her hands were still wrapped tightly around the handle. Ellie's father immediately called emergency services and began performing first aid under the guidance of the 999 operator. But it was already too late. Ellie showed no signs of life. As he knelt beside her, trying desperately to help, he came to a crushing realization. His daughter was gone. Paramedics arrived minutes later, but there was nothing they could do. They confirmed Ellie was deceased and estimated she had been dead for at least 4 hours. Her body showed multiple stab wounds, the majority clustered around her neck. For Ellie's parents, the news was almost impossible to process. Even when the police explained that this was no accident, that Ellie had been murdered, they couldn't believe it. Her father was in deep shock, struggling to accept the reality. For him, it felt like some horrible, surreal mistake. Her body was transferred to the medical examiner's office, where an autopsy revealed the full extent of the violence. Ellie had been stabbed 13 times. There were also signs of strangulation, suggesting the killer had first tried to choke her, and when that failed, grabbed a kitchen knife. Defensive wounds along her arms and hands told a heartbreaking story. Ellie had fought back. She had tried to survive. While forensic teams worked the scene, police began the investigation. They brought Ellie's parents in for questioning, hoping for any insight into who might have wanted to harm their daughter. When asked if anyone came to mind, both parents looked at each other, then gave a single name: Thomas, Ellie's boyfriend. Her mother explained that the relationship had begun just a few months earlier. At first, Ellie was excited. This was her first real romance, and Thomas seemed like a perfect match. He was polite, well-liked, a top student, and a member of the school's rugby team. But it hadn't stayed perfect for long. Things began to unravel quickly. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. As the relationship progressed, Thomas began to demand more and more of Ellie's time. He wanted to be with her constantly, and when she couldn't meet those expectations, tensions started to rise. Ellie, focused on preparing for her final exams and caring for her beloved ponies, simply couldn't give him the kind of attention he was asking for. Instead of easing off, Thomas's behavior only intensified. He became upset whenever she was unavailable, accusing her of not prioritizing their relationship. He called and texted her throughout the day, then grew angry if she didn't respond quickly enough. The constant pressure was beginning to wear on Ellie. Her parents had long sensed that something wasn't quite right. Thomas had never felt like a natural fit for their daughter. He was quiet and withdrawn during visits to their home, which stood in sharp contrast to Ellie's cheerful and outgoing personality. They figured the relationship wouldn't last, and they were right. Just a few months in, Ellie began to consider ending things. Thomas's controlling behavior was making her increasingly uncomfortable. She also knew she needed to stay focused on her academic future. With her university goals in sight, Ellie made a decision. On May 2nd, just one day before she was found dead, she broke up with Thomas. When police spoke to Ellie's friends, they learned more about what happened next. According to them, Thomas hadn't taken the breakup well. He continued to call and message Ellie, urging her to reconsider and asking to meet in person. But Ellie wasn't interested in reopening the conversation. She wanted space and refused to engage. Their mutual friends noticed a sharp shift in Thomas's behavior that day. He seemed emotionally unstable. Later that evening, he posted a message on social media, describing how difficult the last few days had been. He mentioned not only the breakup with Ellie, but also that his father had recently been diagnosed with cancer and his aunt had passed away. The post ended with Thomas saying he was struggling to cope and planned to seek support from the school counselor. After Thomas posted about his emotional struggles on social media, several of his friends reached out to check on him. When they spoke with him, he appeared genuinely distraught. He talked openly about feeling overwhelmed, and his friends described him as deeply depressed. But when police asked whether they believed Thomas could have harmed Ellie, the answer was unanimous. They didn't think it was possible. Still, with the growing list of red flags, investigators decided it was time to speak with him directly. Before that, they took a closer look at Ellie's phone. There, they discovered a key detail. Thomas had messaged her on the morning of May 3rd, asking to meet. Detectives visited Thomas at home and began by asking where he had been that morning. He told them his mother had driven him to school as usual, but that he had been feeling too upset to attend classes. Instead of going in, he waited until she left, walked to the bus stop, and headed back home. On the way, he sent a message to one of his teachers, informing them he wouldn't be at school that day. According to Thomas, once he got home, he stayed there the rest of the day, doing homework and trying to relax. At one point during the conversation, he asked the officers, "Is Ellie okay?" That's when they broke the news. Ellie was dead. Following that interview, investigators went to speak with Thomas's mother, and that's when the story started to unravel. She confirmed that she had dropped Thomas off at school that morning, but when she returned home later in the day, he wasn't there. Detectives went back to confront him about the discrepancy. Thomas then changed his story, claiming he hadn't actually gone back into the house immediately. Instead, he said he had hidden in a closet and waited until his mother left again for work, because he didn't want her to know he had skipped school entirely. During this second conversation, Officers also noticed fresh scratches on Thomas's face. When asked how he got them, he claimed they were self-inflicted. But investigators weren't convinced. Medical examiners had already concluded that Ellie had fought back during the attack. Those scratches could just as easily have been the result of that struggle. Meanwhile, police canvassed Ellie's neighborhood and interviewed her neighbors. One resident offered a potentially significant detail. Earlier that morning, they'd seen a man walking up toward Ellie's house. Unfortunately, the witness was too far away to see the man's face or clearly identify him. All they could provide was a rough description of what the man had been wearing. To verify Thomas's alibi, investigators turned to the GPS data from his phone. At first, the location records confirmed part of his story. After leaving school, his phone did reconnect to his home Wi-Fi. But what detectives uncovered next sharply contradicted everything else he had claimed. At exactly 10:50 a.m., Thomas's phone disconnected from the home network and began moving toward Ellie's neighborhood. Just 3 minutes later, it pinged near her house, where it stayed for roughly an hour. At 11:51 a.m., the phone began heading back toward his home, reconnecting to the Wi-Fi within minutes of arrival. The timeline raised serious doubts. Walking between the two villages would have taken far longer. It would have been impossible for Thomas to cover that distance on foot in just 3 minutes. Investigators suspected he had been driving. They reviewed local surveillance footage along the route and quickly spotted a silver Ford Focus registered to Thomas's parents. The vehicle's movements lined up perfectly with the location data from Thomas's phone. Detectives concluded he must have been behind the wheel. CCTV footage also captured the same car, leaving his house once again later that day, then returning just 18 minutes later. There was no clear footage showing where the vehicle had gone during that short window, but based on the route and time frame, police were able to narrow down the general area where Thomas might have stopped. It appeared he had only stayed in one spot for about a minute, just enough time, they suspected, to discard evidence. Their instincts were right. While searching a wooded area nearby, officers discovered a trash bag hidden in the brush. Inside were blood-stained rags and an apron. With mounting evidence, police secured a search warrant for Thomas's home. When asked to hand over the clothes he had worn that morning, Thomas told officers he had already put them in the washing machine. Detectives seized the clothing and his shoes and sent everything to the lab for forensic analysis. Despite his attempts to clean them, blood traces were found on nearly every item. Technicians were able to extract a viable DNA sample from the stains. The results confirmed it. The blood belonged to Ellie. It matched not only what was found on Thomas's clothing, but also the blood on the rags recovered from the woods. Moreover, Thomas's outfit matched the description given by Ellie's neighbor, the man they had seen outside her home that morning. Taken together, the GPS data, surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and eyewitness account painted a clear and damning picture of what likely happened that day. According to investigators, the evidence pointed to a carefully premeditated murder. After Thomas's mother dropped him off at school that morning, he didn't go to class. Instead, he took a bus back home, hid in a closet, and waited for his mother to leave for work. Once the house was empty, he took the family's silver Ford Focus and drove to Ellie's home. It appeared Ellie had let him in, possibly thinking he just wanted to talk. The two ended up in the kitchen, and that's where things turned violent. The medical examiner's report revealed that Thomas had first attempted to strangle Ellie, likely during a heated confrontation, which is when he received the scratches found on his face. When that failed, he grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed her 13 times. For nearly an hour after the attack, Thomas stayed at the scene. He tried to clean up the blood with rags, leaving smudges across the kitchen. He washed his sneakers in the sink, where forensic teams later found traces of blood, and used a kitchen apron to wipe the knife clean, likely in an attempt to erase fingerprints. Then, in a chilling move, he placed the knife in Ellie's hand and positioned it near her neck, apparently hoping to stage the scene to look like a suicide. Detectives also recalled the text message Ellie's friend had received that morning, the one saying she wasn't going to school and asking not to be picked up. They concluded it had been sent after her death. Thomas had likely unlocked her iPhone using her fingerprint and sent the message himself, hoping to delay the discovery of her body. But Thomas's efforts to cover his tracks didn't end there. After discarding the blood-stained rags and apron in a wooded area and tossing his clothes into the washing machine at home, he approached a neighbor and asked for a ride back to school. There, he attended his remaining classes, chatted with friends, and even visited the school nurse. He told the nurse he was struggling emotionally, mentioning the recent breakup with Ellie, his father's cancer diagnosis, and the recent death of an aunt. Concerned about his mental health, the nurse contacted his mother, who picked him up and took him home. Later that day, before Ellie's body had even been discovered, Thomas posted about his emotional struggles on social media. Investigators later concluded that all of these steps were designed to build an alibi. Within hours, detectives had pieced the story together. That same evening, Thomas, then 17 years old, was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his initial police interrogation, he denied any involvement. But when the case moved to court, he abruptly changed his version of events. At the first hearing on August 29, 2019, 4 months after Ellie's death, Thomas stood before the judge and confessed to killing her. But there was a twist. He now claimed that he had gone to Ellie's house that morning to study. An argument broke out, and according to him, everything after that became a blur. He recalled trying to strangle her, but insisted he didn't remember the rest. Prosecutors rejected the claim, pointing to multiple inconsistencies. Ellie had made it clear to friends and family that she no longer wanted anything to do with Thomas. The idea that they were studying together made little sense, especially since she had arranged a ride to school later that morning. And if Thomas's memory truly was blank, the prosecution asked, how could he explain spending an hour cleaning the crime scene, staging the body, disposing of evidence, and crafting an alibi? The court agreed. In November 2019, Thomas was found guilty of murder. Before sentencing, he gave a final statement, apologizing to Ellie's family and expressing what appeared to be genuine remorse. But there was one complicating factor. Because Thomas was only 17 at the time of the crime, his age impacted the sentence. The judge gave him a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 12 years. An additional 5 years were added for the brutality of the crime. This means Thomas could potentially walk free at the age of 34. The verdict sparked immediate outrage, not just from Ellie's family, but from people across the country. Many were stunned that someone who had carried out a premeditated, calculated murder could receive a sentence that allowed for parole in just 12 years. Despite the public outcry, the court's decision stood. Legally, nothing could be done to reverse it. Ellie's father spoke publicly, expressing his deep frustration. He warned that the sentence sent a dangerous message and feared that Thomas, once released, would still pose a threat to society. In his words, Thomas was a psychopath who should never be allowed to walk free again. Motivated by what they viewed as a miscarriage of justice, Ellie's parents turned their grief into action. They spent the following years campaigning to change the law and ensure that other families wouldn't have to face the same outcome. Their efforts paid off. In 2021, lawmakers passed Ellie's Law, legislation that gave courts the authority to sentence juvenile murderers to up to 27 years in prison without the possibility of parole. But there was one painful limitation. The law would not apply retroactively. Thomas had been sentenced under the previous legal framework, and his case remained unaffected. The only additional measure Ellie's parents were able to secure was a condition requiring Thomas to undergo long-term psychological therapy following his release, an effort, however limited, to prevent him from committing further harm. In the years since, Ellie's family has honored her memory in ways that reflect who she was. They've organized community events where local children are invited to ride Ellie's horses, a gesture her mother says brings a small measure of comfort. For a girl whose greatest joy was horseback riding, it's a fitting tribute to a life taken far too soon. Share your thoughts on this story in the comment section. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.